Hi, Merkei here. Welcome to my next video, and today we're gonna talk about structs. So, everybody loves structs, right? But not really, because they have some quite lovely features, but they tend to break sometimes, and especially when you do some nesting. And maybe you make a map, maybe you make a data asset, you nest a few structs, and it all kind of breaks down. So yeah, why is it? Because, well, you cannot really compile structs as you would with normal classes. They kind of compile themselves when you save, but then not really, and you have to refresh everything. And when you make a new struct or edit that, then you kind of lose your data and all that stuff. So I've been thinking, because I'm making a project, what would be the way to sort of make a better struct? The one that you can explicitly compile and the one that doesn't break that easily. And I come up with a solution, and I'm gonna tell you that solution right now. So maybe some intro. Let's say we have a third-person character. I just made a new template. This is blueprint template called Struct tutorial. It's just third-person template. So let's go to our third-person character. Maybe I forgot to edit the preference of opening in main window. So let's do that right now. Main window, lovely. And in the third-person character, maybe we would like to hold some data asset for some objects. Like maybe we collect some items, and those items are constructed by data assets, so on, so on, right? So we make a new PDA, which is primary data set, and we call it PDA item structure, for example. And we maybe want to add a map, and that map will be maybe some actions we can take with that object, right? So we would have a mesh and a name, right? That name would be, let's just make a name. Mesh would be static mesh asset. And for actions, we would like to have maybe string mapped to, well, some sort of actions, but those actions we want it to be something more complicated than just a float. Maybe we want 2 floats or 5 floats or 5 different objects, and all as a value tied to the key. And normally what you would do, you would just go to blueprint structure as action struct, right? Type a few things, maybe value 1 and value 2. And first will be a bool, second one will be a float, lovely, and just plug this in. Right, and then you can, make a new data asset. This is from miscellaneous item structure. This will be called example item. And then we can, of course, edit whatever we want, call it, and add those actions, like A, B, and those two have some values we can change, right? And when you change this struct, so you add a new variable, maybe you delete this variable, maybe you change default values. Well, you cannot really click that compile, can you, right? It's just kind of there. And when you save, it auto-compiles, and maybe it does it well, maybe it does it not very well. Also, a second drawback to structs is that it's just values. So you cannot do anything with that except adding values, right? So if you know some C++, And if you make games, then you most likely do know something about C++ class. A C++ class is almost identical to a struct, but an Unreal Engine sort of has its own implementation for structs. It's still a class, but it's sort of stripped down and it has some additional functionality. So if we wanted to make our own struct, we could essentially just make our own class. But the problem with just object classes, so for example, we would like to make a new object, call it pp super struct, or maybe new struct, and plug in some values, for example value 1. Let's do the same as in our struct, value 2, float. Yeah, let's mark it instance editable. And when we try to plug this in to our PDA, so here, new struct, well, the fun thing happens and there is nothing there, right? We cannot really edit that object, and we can edit a struct. So that is our problem. How do we make that object behave like a struct and be editable in here? Because if we manage to do that, it's basically, this could be our struct. So the way you do it is you kind of have to go into C++, because without C++, I mean, it's not exposed to the editor. You have to do it in the source code. But it's a very minor change, and I promise you it's quite cool. So just follow me. It's a standard blueprint project, so you can just follow me. But you need some kind of IDE and build tools to actually build your project. So what I do, I have Visual Studio, and you go to a new C++ class, just pick an object, next, type whatever you want. I called my struct super struct. Just click public, create class, and that will generate Visual Studio files for you. It will open the editor, and you kind of have to then close the editor, edit the code, compile again. And if you have a C++ based project, then you don't have to do this. You can just do whatever you want, just edit the Visual Studio source files. So I already did that, so I'm gonna just close my editor, and this is our struct. This is literally, I just typed super struct and generated CPP and .h. And the only thing that we need to do is just edit that U class. First thing we'll do is just standard type, standard stuff. It will be blueprintable, so it's able to be used as parent class in blueprint classes. The second thing I will add is blueprint type, so it can be referenced in blueprints. And now the funny part. So edit in line new. And this basically means that we can edit the properties of that object in line, so in editor, in the editor properties panel. And the next thing that we really need is default to instanced. And what this does is it tells the editor that our class should be created and instanced in editor. So when we basically before we run a game. And we need that because that's how struct behaves. Struct behaves in a way that when you run an editor, open some fucking data assets, whatever, then the struct is automatically instanced, and that's why you can change those values. So that's the only thing you need to do. Just save that. F5 to compile. It will be pretty fast for me, but if you do it the first time, it will take a while. So don't be scared. And when we open the editor, which will happen in a moment, now we can go to that our new struct and change the class to superstruct. Lovely. And now this struct is instance and behaves as a struct. So we didn't change anything here, basically. We just go to our data asset, and now we can pick our new struct. And now we have values to edit. So very lovely. This gives us basically the same sort of usage that struct does, but additionally to that, it behaves like an object. So we have whole, standard object editor that we can use to sort of analyze the data, change, add some functions, and so on and so on. Before, if you wanted to sort of have some custom implementation for structs or have some functions that you wanted to perform on structs, then you would have to go to blueprint function library, and maybe add some functions there that inputs a struct. And now you can basically add a new function, perform calculations on that struct, and just output the result. Maybe the result is just a success. So did it compile, or did it calculate, or did it not calculate, and so on. And how do you use this? Well, let's go back to our third person character, because there are still some quirks that we have to tackle. But let's just add our data asset to a player. This will be called item asset, for example. Let's plug in our item structure. And now our item asset, I have this actions map. Let's just pick the first one. So values, get a copy of the first one. Let's maybe make a begin play event so it kind of runs and we can print some strings. And maybe let's see if our value is actually working or not. So example item, we have just one entry called A, and let's make a value of 8 for value 2, and let's see if it's working properly. So get value 2. Let's print it, let's see if it works. Compile, play. It's 0. What happened? Access non-trying to read property item asset. Of course, I forgot to plug this in, because we need a data asset to actually operate this on. Let's try again. And it's 8. So the value we set in here works lovely here. And if we would like to change that value, because we might want to do that, then you just, set value to, and it's equivalent to set members, right? So in a normal struct, you will just set members and pick whatever value you want to set, and that would update the struct. And this is that, right? So just pick a value, set it. So if we set it to, for example, 15, and then pick the value again, and we can see that it updates slowly. So what are the problems with that? Because it's not all, lovely and yeah. One problem is that you can't really break it. So you can't really take all of the values, and you can't make those values. Additionally, if you have that sort of struct in a node as a pin, you can't really split it and set individual pins to that. You kind of have to do a little workaround. But I'm gonna tell you how to do it. It's not gonna be perfect, but I mean, if you want to use it and you think it's fine, then you'll live with the consequences, I guess. So what about breaking? Breaking is honestly, you kind of have to just get those values. So that's breaking. And for making, you have to do this. Construct object from class. Pick your struct. So in our example, it will be new struct. And if you marked those values as instance editable and expose on spawn, then it's gonna show here. So that's your make struct. And when you have a function that requires that sort of, custom struct, let's call it test str_im, for example, and it requires a new struct. Then you construct a new struct, which essentially does the same thing that normal struct does, because a normal struct, if you make it, it already instantiates that struct, creates that object, and assigns to whatever you want. And yeah, that's it. That's how you pass structs, and you can then, of course, use your functions from that struct. That function could be, of course, pure if you want. And yeah, something for something, but generally I would say it's kind of better than a standard struct. I don't yet know what additional drawbacks there are, but for now I didn't see too many, apart from what I just said, so splitting, breaking, making. And yeah, if you decide to give it a go, see if it fits your project, then let me know in the comments down below how it works for you. And if you saw any problems that prevents you from using it in your project. So yeah, that's a quickie from me, and I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next time. Bye bye.